Hello everyone, welcome to an all new episode of the Indic Explorer Show. Please don't forget to like, comment, share and subscribe to the show. We need all your support. You would have heard of karate, taekwondo and kung fu. But how many of us know about martial arts traditions that exist in India? There is this very unique and special martial arts tradition that exists in southern Tamil Nadu and Kerala, which is called Kalaripayattu. And as you saw in that introduction opening video, it's the grandfather of Kung Fu. It's a very interesting story. Kung Fu's origin lies in this martial art that was there, that has been practiced in Kerala for over, 2000 years at least. To the extent that I understand it, maybe more. So to talk about Kalaripayattu, its various nuances, its origin story, its link with Kung Fu and many other things, I have with me a very special guest today, Ram Sundar. Welcome to the show, Ram. Namaste.
Namaste, and thank you so much, Vineet, for having me here today. I'm excited.
Absolutely. So, Ram, to give context to the viewers, can you just give us an idea of the history and the origin of Kalari?
Absolutely. Kalari, as we know it, is a martial art, and it has had an unbroken chain for the last 3,000 years at least. And it was, the word Kalari literally means battlefield, and Payat means practice. So when you put it together, it's the art of fighting a war. And that's all it is. And it was taught to the military in ancient southern Indian kingdoms from probably 1,000 before Christian era, 1,000 years before Christian era, so 1000 BCE or even further back. And Kalari itself is divided into three types: northern, central, and southern. And the northern style, which focuses more on body conditioning and elaborate movements, that is said to have been created by Lord Parshurama. And the southern style is said to have been passed on by the sage Agastya. So when we think about this, when we put things in context with the history of the subcontinent, then you see that the origin story is lost to legend. So it's that old.
So basically this was practiced for people who want to train to join the military, right? Or was it also practiced by common people for physical, like I'm talking about historically, for physical fitness or self-defense? Or was it purely a military tradition?
Kalaripayattu for a very long time has been a purely military tradition. And when people learned it, to my understanding, when people learned Kalari as a martial art, then it's so that the kings and the royal military could tap into these resources whenever they needed to fight wars. Because a lot of times, even today in several countries, people get drafted into the military. This is common in the US or in, let's say, Germany. And in countries like Israel, for example, people are forced to serve a couple of years in the military. So think of the same thing, the exact same thing in ancient times in southern India. And that's exactly what it was.
Okay. And as our intro music showed, it's the grandfather of Kung Fu. And I think that story of the evolution of Kalari to Kung Fu is something not many people would know about. There is a very interesting movie of Surya as well on, this part of this. But Ram, can you narrate the story of how Kalaripayattu, a martial art practiced somewhere in southern India, goes to China and becomes Kung Fu?
There was a prince in the 5th century CE, and his name was Bodhidharma. A lot of people especially in the Indian subcontinent, have probably heard of Bodhidharma at some point of time. But he was the one who traveled from southern India all the way across the Himalayas into China. And the whole goal was to exchange culture and religion and science with the Chinese emperor at the time. But unfortunately, due to some disagreements, the Chinese emperor did not entertain him for very long. So he moved back down south, and he stayed in a village at some point. And he saw that the villagers, the monks there, they were really sick, and there were a lot of invaders in the form of bandits and robbers, thieves, whatever. And he wanted to get them to a physical level where they could defend themselves. They were healthy enough, first of all, and then they could defend themselves. So he taught them what we know today as the 12 hands of Buddha, and he taught them a series of exercises that are taught today as Yi Jin Jing. And these are a series of exercises. When you perform them, then over time your body improves and it becomes naturally healthy and vibrant. And he taught them self-defense arts, and he spent the rest of his life over there. He spent several years without talking to anybody. He spent like 9 years with, sitting in a cave and meditating, and he wouldn't talk to anyone. And at other times he was teaching the villagers, and he developed a combat system which was based on Kalaripayattu. Now that said, when he died, when he was old, then people didn't want him to leave the village and go back to where he came from, which was southern India. So it's unfortunate, but it was done out of goodwill that they poisoned him. He knew that he was going to, the food contained poison. But what they wanted was for him to stay there, die there, and for him to be buried there. Because they believed that his presence would protect their village and all the surrounding villages from any calamities. So he happily aided. He died there. And all this is legend, so I cannot verify 100%, but a lot of it is documented, of course. Now, he was buried there, and they built a temple for him right there. And this is what we know today as the Shaolin Temple. In Chinese, Shao means little, and Lin is pine. So Shaolin is a little pine tree, because that place was abundant in pine trees. So Shaolin Temple was built there, and they continued teaching Kalaripayattu, which evolved into what we know today as Shaolin Kung Fu. And that has evolved, and it's so different because of the physiology of the Chinese people and the way they kind of adapted the martial art to suit them.
So a little to dwell further on this point, how does Kalari compare and contrast to Kung Fu in terms of principle, style, philosophy, conditioning? What's the similarity, if any, differences? How did it change after going to China?
What we know for a fact is nearly all military generals in the Chinese imperial army for a very long time got their training at the Shaolin Temple. Now, the Shaolin Temple itself is dedicated to a monastic way of life. So you spend 10 years, 12 years doing nothing but the martial art itself, which is in itself a way of life. It's a complete system. It's just like the yogic system. So you have body conditioning, you have self-defense skills, you have weapon skills, everything. So they did that so they could gain the necessary skills and discipline to serve in the army. Now, in terms of principles, that's where the similarity would kind of end. Now, in terms of the goals, Kalari being a battlefield martial art, since its beginning, it has been to train soldiers or to train a common person to be fit enough and to be skilled enough to fight in a war in the shortest span of time. And that is why the progression of Kalari goes from body conditioning to weapons, and then hand-to-hand combat being the last step. But when you compare that to Kung Fu, then your body conditioning is first, but you're taught unarmed combat next. And then you're taught weapons. Only when you know that you're self-aware and you're knowledgeable enough to handle weapons. But in Kalari, it's the opposite. Because when you train to handle wooden weapons and metal weapons, then you automatically become more skilled and more self-aware, that you can that you see the weapon as an extension of yourself, and you are more battle ready.
If two people of these exponents of these two martial arts were to stand next to each other and were to do, like, not against each other, but to duel against practitioners of the same arts, would there be any similarities?
I would say very few, possibly almost none at all. Now, one of the reasons for that is, just to elaborate on what I said before, Kung Fu is more focused on form. You have to do everything the way it should be done, right? Like, for example, I as you are aware, and now your viewers will be aware, that I practice Kalari, but I've also done Kung Fu, and I've taught Tai Chi, or rather, I continue to teach Tai Chi to this day. And it's like when your fist is in a certain position, it has to be in that position, and when you're moving it, then then the form becomes very important. Kalari is more focused on the end result. What is your end result? What is your goal? So your form will evolve, but there's less of a stress on the correct form until you actually understand what it takes, and until you gain your speed or your agility, or things like that. So I would say that the forms have completely changed or evolved to suit each civilization's own needs and their diets and their physiological build, things like that. And so it would be difficult to notice a lot of similarities.
So basically, you're saying the focus of Kung Fu is more on the aesthetic, and for Kalari, it is more of combat. Like, it is more of real world practical. So in a sense, you're saying that something which is more choreographed is not really useful for real combat or military warfare situations. And something which is more militaristic is not necessarily pleasing to the eye. Is that a valid assumption to make?
Correct. A fight is always chaotic. Your Hollywood or Bollywood, whatever movie industry fights that you see are always choreographed. And if you look at Jackie Chan's movies, for example, a lot of these fights are drawn out. They last 5 minutes. Most fights don't last more than 30 seconds, maybe a minute, something like that, right? Every art, every fighting art has rules. When you look at karate, then I'm sorry, I'm going to go on a rant here because there's a lot to cover based on what you just said. So that's it. Every art has rules. If you look at a boxing match, then they're not allowed to punch below the belt. You're not allowed to use your legs. There are very specific ways to protect yourself, and there are very specific ways. There are only 3 kinds of punches, right? The jab, the hook, and 4 kinds. And then the cross and the uppercut. And that's it. There's no use of the legs except to move around. And in a boxing match, you have either a technical knockout or an actual knockout or a point system. But for any of these to work, you need to have your form has to be perfect. If you look at karate tournaments, then you're also judged based on points. So a lot of these things, a lot of these arts are focused on form rather than the actual function. Today we live in a civilized society where you're probably 99.9 whatever percent to never get into a probability of never getting into a fight. And if you do, then your objective is not to take someone's life, because then you're at fault in the eyes of the law. We have a legal system for that. If you're being attacked by somebody and you do something in self-defense, then there is a legal component also now involved, which means that the legal system will judge you based on whether your reaction was proportionate or not to the attack. Now, if I'm walking down the street, if someone tries to mug me with a knife and I point a gun at them, then the next question that the law will ask me is, was my reaction of pointing a gun proportionate or disproportionate to what the other person did to me? Which means when you take this philosophy to martial arts, then a lot of martial arts have lost their edge because they're no longer intended to take someone's life. The thing about Kung Fu is the same. That said, if you make someone with 1 year of experience in karate or taekwondo fight against someone with 1 year of experience in Kung Fu, the karate person will always win. Always. You know why? Because the Kung Fu person is still learning the form, still improving their body conditioning, still evolving. So they don't have the skills built up within that short frame of time.
What
to be able to defeat this person.
What if the Kalari person is also in the same combat?
Southern Kalari is from the get-go, it's focused on combat itself. So Southern Kalari style itself is focused on getting results. Northern Kalari is focused on improving your body as well. Now, if you take someone with 1 year of experience, then it's probably likely that someone with a karate or taekwondo background will win. But let's say 2 years, 3 years, longer, the karate person or taekwondo person will always lose.
Against the Kalari person.
They stagnate after
against
a while. Or Kung Fu, or even Kung Fu, Shaolin Kung Fu. Like when you teach it properly, once a person gets to a position where they've completed the body conditioning part, then their body is already healthy, their reflexes are built up, their skills are built up, their awareness is built up to a much higher level than other traditional Eastern arts, like karate or taekwondo. So with some of the other arts, they're going to stagnate after a while. So they've learned some stuff, but they're so focused on that it's like they don't challenge. No other art challenges your body and your mind as much as Kalari does. But when you get past that threshold, then you become a really, really good fighter. And that's the whole point of it. Now, I have to also point out that Kalari never evolved into a sport.
Yeah.
And that's why you don't have Kalari tournaments where people are judged on points. You know, kick to the chest, 1 point, punch to the chest, half a point. I don't know what it is, right? But I know that I've known enough karate people that I know it's based on points and there's a specific point system. And then you stop, right? But how does that help you in a real life situation? It doesn't. And Kalari was always more focused on real life scenarios than in tournaments. That even during the British rule, when Kalari was banned by the British, people were practicing underground. People were practicing, hidden from the
Why was it?
the authorities.
Just one second.
that
Why was it banned by the British, and then how was it practiced after the ban?
So, as you know, even in the 1700s, soldiers were taught Kalaripayattu, and there were Kalari also can mean your practice arena. So the place where we practice is called a Kalari. Just like in Japanese, they call it a dojo, right? The equivalent word is Kalari. Now, in the 1700s, there were armed rebellions against the British. And Kalari was also effectively used to drive both the Portuguese and the Dutch out of southern India. And the ruler of Parsi, he led an armed uprising against, this was in Wayanad, close to Palakkad, right? Or Thrissur or wherever. He led an armed uprising against the British. And the British suffered a lot of losses. Eventually, they brought things under control. But when the British took over the entire subcontinent, they banned Kalari because it was deemed too dangerous for them. So by banning this martial art, they ensured that there would be no open martial training for the people that could result in an armed rebellion against the British.
So how
At
did
that
people?
time, a lot of Kalari gurus.
Yeah. So how was the training then? Did it go underground, or what happened after the ban?
Yeah, when I say underground, not literally underground, but hidden from public view. So a lot of Kalari gurus, they taught to a very select and trusted group of people to keep the martial art alive, but also to defend themselves in case of unforeseen events. But the main intention, I believe, was to keep the tradition alive. And they did it without the knowledge of the British authorities.
Okay. And is there what is the religious or spiritual link of Kalari with Hinduism? Like in terms of either when performing a duel, is there a ritual? Are there any gods invoked? What is the Hindu dharmic element in Kalari?
Not a lot of people know this, but Kalari is the mother of yoga. Yoga, as we know it, comes from Kalari. And Yogasana, when we talk about Hatha Yoga, for example, then there are 84 postures in Hatha Yoga. And these 84 postures are designed to improve certain muscle groups in the body. Kalari is a little more dynamic, so you have some postures, but for the most part, the postures are combined with movements. So think of it as something similar to a combination of Hatha Yoga and Vinyasa Yoga. That's the first part, Meitari, which is the body conditioning. Mei means body. Anyway, that said, in a Kalari itself, there's something called the Putara, which is for, let's say, presiding deities like Ganesha or Shiva. Kalari itself, apart from the martial component, it's also used for performance arts. For example, Kathakali. So you'll have presiding deities for each of those. So when you look at Kalari as a rectangular arena, then one corner is the Putara, which is dedicated to the deities. Another is called the Guru Tara, which is dedicated to the ancestors and your guru and their gurus. And, so before you start practicing in the Kalari, you have to offer your respect to both the Putara and the Guru Tara. And then you start practicing.
That's a very strong dharmic element, right? The lineage, the respect to the unbroken chain, which is quite interesting. So coming to
Absolutely.
the the martial art, the core of the martial art itself, can you throw some light on the kind of weapon work, the training, and the kind or category of weapons that are used?
So once your Meitari or Meipayattu or body conditioning is done, then the next step would be to learn wooden weapons. And that's called Kol Tari. Kol means a stick, right? And you have long staffs similar to what you would see in Japanese or Chinese martial arts. They call them bo staffs, B-O. Yeah. So we have long staffs just like that, 5 feet, 5.5 feet long. And then you have short staffs. And then even with the staffs, you first start with one, and then you move to two. And then you have, let's say, one short staff, and then you move to two short staffs. There's also a weapon called Otta, O-T-T-A. And that's a curved weapon, curved wooden weapon. And you have metal weapons next, which is, and that stage is called Angatari. And in metal weapons, you have swords, shields, daggers, and there's one weapon which is exclusive to Kalari. It's called an Urumi, which is a flexible sword. And it's not just one flexible sword. It can be a sheath with one handle. So the sword itself can have not just one flexible sword, but it can have 1, 2, 4, 8, 12, 16. And it's ridiculously difficult to control this. You need a certain level of expertise because it is rated as the world's most dangerous melee weapon. And at some point of time, let's say 2,000 years ago, sorry, it used to be used in combat on the battlefield. But the problem with the weapon is if you have people, if you have your team and you're using a weapon with like so many blades, then there's no control over who you're doing damage to. And as a result, it went out of style on the battlefield. But it continued to remain in style in, one against many or one-on-one combat. And the reason for that is if you're just one, then there's no problem of hurting your own team. And people used to wear these flexible swords as belts or underneath their belts. So let's say 500, 600, 700 years ago, even probably recently, like 300-400 years ago, people continue to wear them as belts because then in a dire situation, you can just take that and you have a weapon, undisclosed weapon or concealed weapon.
Right. So you mentioned the first 1 year is more of physical conditioning. Then they graduate into weapon work, right? How long is the duration of the training with different category of weapons? And then when they go to hand combat, how long is that? So how would a typical training course of Kalari, how long would it be? How would it be structured?
No, it's not about 1 year. It all depends on, there's no time frame. So it all depends on your own physical fitness level, your flexibility, and your willingness to learn. Because Kalari is one of those arts that you cannot learn. You have to internalize it. It has to become part of you. There are simply so many postures, so many movements that you cannot memorize all of them. It becomes part of your muscle memory. And that said, everybody's learning curve is different. So what takes 1 month for someone to just learn the Mayapayattu could take 2 years for someone else. But the progression is body conditioning, wooden weapons, metal weapons, and then unarmed combat.
Okay. And in terms of the physical training and conditioning, what kind of exercises or what rigor is followed in that? And secondly, also, what kind of diet plan is prescribed as an ideal one for a Kalari trainee and a full-fledged Kalari fighter? What should they eat? What shouldn't they eat to maximize their, training and their practice?
To address your first question, I, as a scientist myself, I like to maintain checklists, and therefore, my own checklist, for example, is for me to effectively perform Mayapayattu and be able to graduate into the next level. I should be able to do front splits. I should be able to do side splits, back bend, and be able to kick. Raise my leg in the form of a straight kick and be able to touch my shoulder with my knee on both sides. I also should be able to do a jump split. So these are they're not specific exercises. Some of them, like leg raises, there are several different kinds of leg raises, and like straight or cross or circular, clockwise, counterclockwise, all this stuff. But to me, the checklist just helps me keep track of what my flexibility needs to be in terms of clear, definable milestones. So yeah, splits, back bend completely, and side splits, and all this stuff, right? Now, to address your second question, I am not an expert. I am vegetarian, but I think it's quite important to eat clean and have a balanced diet, just like any other martial art. So if you're eating McDonald's food every day, then you can probably be sure that you'll never be healthy enough, because exercise, as you know, exercise does 15% to your body, but your diet will do the remaining 85% if you actually want to get fit.
But Kalari fighters used to eat non-veg, red meat, all of that, right? I mean, typically. Yeah,
I don't know about typically, but Brahmins also learn Kalari, like the Nambudri Brahmins, right? Brahmins have learned Kalari, so I don't think they encourage you one way or another. I don't think no one said you have to have a vegetarian diet or you have to eat meat, but the focus is more on where you're getting your nutrition from and how it's balanced. Now we're going into a different, slightly different subject here, but I will tell you that the same nutrition, the same amount of carbs and protein and fat and fiber, the exact same amount for two people will be processed in completely different ways by their body. What you're taking in is the same, but what your body chooses to do with it is different. So when you think about, let's say what Sadhguru says, because Sadhguru also practices Kalari, by the way. Isha Foundation has a Kalari training there. Except I think the focus is more on Mayapayattu, but I'm not sure. I haven't done that program yet, but I know I've done the Shambhavi Mahamudra and all that. My girlfriend and I practice to this day. But anyway, when you think about what Sadhguru says, right? It's I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought. We were talking about how your food is processed in the body. So it could be trial and error. So If your body doesn't feel light and functional after you eat a meal, if it makes you feel heavy and lethargic, then that's something that you should try and avoid or eat less of. Because at the end of a meal, you have to feel not so full that you cannot even move. And it's not about how much you eat, but it's about what you eat.
Are there any key principles of or techniques of Kalari combat, like, in terms of any basic framework or anything like that?
I think when you do the body conditioning exercises, then your body reaches its maximum potential. You start building muscles you don't even know you were supposed to be using. So when you look at different people, like for example, football players are built differently than tennis players, who are built differently than martial artists. So when you practice martial arts, even the style will influence the kind of muscles that you use. And therefore, when you have an art like Kalari, which has one complete section on just building up the body to be able to fight, then your body will build up in a way that is optimum for you to function properly in life, as well as optimum for you to learn the next steps of Kalari. And that's also validated by the fact that Kalari is the mother of yoga. The whole point of yoga is to get your body, mind, and spirit aligned, but also in a way that it functions properly. And that philosophy comes from Kalari.
Are there any practical, if can Kalari be learnt as a technique of self-defense in the modern world? And what are the practical considerations for that? Because it was obviously used as military combat technique, right? No, now for someone who's not into the military, who's a normal civilian, regular person, wants to learn it for self-defense, what practical considerations are there for that?
One thing is commitment, because there is no one who will teach you, and thankfully so, there's no one who will teach you just the self-defense parts of Kalari. If that's what you want, just the self-defense and nothing else, then there are things that, there are certain styles, Sistema, for example, or Krav Maga, whatever, right? They are very focused on self-defense and they're focused on that single goal. And they're highly effective. And we all know how effective they are. But that said, Kalari, because of the progression itself, requires a certain level of commitment and discipline that make it very challenging for a lot of people. Now, as a martial artist myself, I will tell you that at least 90-95% of people who start learning a martial art will never progress beyond a certain level because they'll drop out or they lose interest or they won't be able to push themselves and push their comfort zone and make it bigger. And Kalari forces you to do that. So if you want to continue with Kalari and learn martial arts, then you have to learn the body conditioning first. And you can never be an effective fighter. You can never be effective in defending yourself or your loved ones if you are not healthy enough. That's the goal of any martial art, is to get you to be healthy enough to even do something with it.
Is there any link between Kalari and the Keralite dance form of Kathakali? Is there any linkages? Because you mentioned Northern Kalari is a little more aesthetic. So is there any, because I see certain Kathakali performances have a martial art like performative aspect to them. Is there any linkage between the two?
Yes, there absolutely is a link. Northern style is not aesthetic. Northern style focuses on deep and elaborate movements, but Northern style is also focused on weapons. Southern style is more focused on, or this is from all the research, because I practice both Northern and Southern style from Ekavira Academy. We learn both the Northern and the Southern styles, and they're distinctive enough. You see the differences there. Now, that said, Kalari, if not performed from a self-defense standpoint, is performed by a lot of theater artists, performance artists, specifically Kathakali, because it gives you the kind of body conditioning that you need to do certain difficult movements, and it also helps you move your body and attain that kind of flexibility that you need for Kathakali.
But all Kathakali artists learn Kalari, and or is it only a few? And do Kalari martial artists also have some grounding in Kathak? Like, what's the interdisciplinary interaction between the two forms?
No, Kathakali is essentially theater, right? So Kathakali, to my understanding, a lot of Kathakali performance, most if not all Kathakali performers learn Kalari because it helps them with their art. But the difference here is you don't need to learn actual combat. You don't need to learn how to, let's say, lock someone's arm or wrist, or you don't learn pressure points, things like that you do with Kalari. Because it's not useful to you in a dance performance. You only learn the aspects of Kalari that will help you with your Kathakali performance.
So, what are the health and fitness benefits, especially a lot of the viewers of the show, youngsters who want to take up Kalari from a fitness perspective, right? And we are part of this whole gymming generation. Let's say someone wants to take up Kalari just as a fitness, improvement, this thing. So what are the health and fitness benefits of Kalari?
Okay, imagine that you're learning the same movements that you would use in a martial art, but you're not learning any actual two-person movements, right? So for fight training, your guru would put two of you against each other and say, okay, you're going to punch this way and they're going to block this way. And then you kind of learn and internalize the punching and blocking and evading and all these movements. But let's take the second person out of the picture. So now it's just you. You're learning the movements, but you're not getting actual hand-to-hand practice, right? So let's see what benefits you can get from just learning the movements. You're still able to do splits. You're still able to, jump, power jump faster and longer than the average person. You're able to, let's say, hold your breath longer underwater or even on land, right? Which helps you with swimming, things like that. So you tend to, with deeper postures, you tend to build your leg muscles. You tend to improve blood circulation. You calm your mind. And when you do all this, then your heart becomes stronger as well, right? Which means, first of all, as you grow older, you're less of a fall risk, because your leg muscles are evolved to such an extent that you don't fall. You don't slip and fall. Even if you fall, your bones are strong, so you don't end up breaking your bones. Your brain is clear, or your mind is clear, because of all this deep meditative martial arts that you've been doing. Now, I with my smartwatch, I tend to track my heart rate. I tend to track the number of calories that I burn also, just because of curiosity. How does that compare to, let's say, kickboxing, which I also have practiced? How does that compare? And I have been known to burn just through 1 hour of Kalari exercise. On average, I can burn about 700-800 calories easily. That's a lot, by the way. And your heart rate goes up without you actually having to run. So for people who are, let's say, for people who have Achilles tendonitis, or let's say plantar fasciitis, people who cannot run, people who have problems with high impact exercises, by doing these postures, they can still get their heart rate up without any impact. So the benefits would be, you can do this at home in your living room and still get the same benefits from 1 hour of jogging or 1 hour of running.
Wow, interesting. And now in popular culture, especially cinema, how has Kalari been portrayed? I'm assuming some movies or something would have been made, or novels would have been written with a Kalari setting. I'm assuming it would most likely be in Tamil or Malayalam. So how has it been portrayed, and what impact does this portrayal have on its general popularity or perception amongst the masses?
Kalari is seeing a revival now. It saw a mini revival after India's independence. And now, thankfully, it's seeing a revival in a big way, thanks to a few schools. There are more schools opening up. Yeah, so unfortunately, at least it's my opinion, that it has been portrayed rather poorly in movies. Now, the two movies that I can think of where Kalari has even been shown to any significant degree. One is the Tamil movie with Surya. It's called Yedam Arivu, or Seventh Sense. And the other one was Bagi in Hindi with Tiger Shroff. Now, in that, they got some of the postures right, but they got the history wrong. In Surya's movie, they got the history right, they got some of the postures wrong. Most of them. Well, okay, you can tell that he's undergone some kind of training, and but unfortunately, it's like when you see something that you've been practicing and you can pick faults in it, right? I don't mean to be nitpicky. I watch movies for entertainment, and I watch movies to be entertained, and that's it, right? But I can still see that they could have done a better job with it. I don't know of a whole lot of books. One of the reference books that I use for my Kalari is by his name is Dr. Philip Zarili, and the name of the book is When the Body Becomes All Eyes. He spent several years in Kerala learning Kalari under different time periods, I think between the 1970s and 1990s or something, and he documented everything he saw about Kalari. I don't know of a whole lot of books on Kalari, by the way, but they could definitely be portrayed differently. There was a movie, another Tamil movie called Patas with Dhanush, in which they portray Southern Kalari, which in Tamil Nadu is called Adimurai. So that they did a decent job, I will say that.
The history as well as the combat, both, is it?
Yeah, the history is addressed only for a quick minute, but the combat itself is the basis of the movie, and they did a decent job of it. I will definitely say that. One movie where they paid a lot of attention and they got most of the details right is Kamal Hassan's movie Indian. But that is more of just the Varma Kalai, the pressure point the pressure point part of Kalari itself.
Okay. So you were mentioning, like, so basically talking about schools and how it is practiced, are there any gurukuls, or are there any long established lineages, or traditions or orders where people are trained? How is the training system like? And you yourself are planning to launch the first Kalari school in North America, so you can also mention a little bit about that.
Yeah, happy to. So there is still the Guru Shishya Parampara in Kalari, and that's something that we're quite proud of, to maintain that lineage system. And there are several schools opening up now. Up until, let's say, even the 90s, there were only a handful of Kalari schools, and I wanted to learn Kalari from when I was very young, but I didn't have the opportunity because we lived in Bangalore, and there were no Kalari schools in Bangalore at the time. If you wanted to learn Kalari, you had to go either to Kerala or to southern Tamil Nadu. But today, it's not like that. So, there are some very well-known schools. One of which is the one that I belong to, and that is Ekavira Kalari Academy. But there are also others like Kalari Kendram, CVN Kalari is a very famous one. There are several schools. And today, as COVID has taught us, you can still choose to do something online until you get to the point where, as long as you have a good teacher, until you get to the point where there's another person involved for your one-on-one or hand-to-hand combat and all that, there are many things that you can achieve through video calls. And that can be valuable because then you're not limited by geographic region. If this had been available to me in the 90s, then I would have already, been much further than I am today. Now that said, I've been my guru, and I have been talking about how we can start the first Kalari Academy here in North America because there isn't one. So how do I practice? Is mostly through videos, and and I plan to my next trip to India. I will go to my Gurukul as well, right? So until then, and then once that happens, we will open up a branch here.
Where do you plan to set this up? In Canada?
Correct. I live in Toronto, so okay. I will set it up in Toronto.
Nice. Interesting. What kind of challenges does Kalari face today? In terms of learning and practice, and what can be done to kind of better preserve and promote this martial art form, according to you?
I was thinking about this the other day. I was watching a video in which BBC interviewed this teacher of, I think it's a famous Kalari Academy, I don't remember, but BBC did an article. And he was talking about how there are nearly 50 Kalari schools today. This was a few years ago. And as I heard that, I thought to myself, there are probably 50 karate schools in my neighborhood. So, I mean, think about how many karate schools there would be everywhere else in Toronto or in the province or even in the world, right? There's like millions of them. And what we can do, one, is to understand that this is a completely 100% Indian art that has given birth to so many other arts. So, just like any other Indian art form, I celebrate Kalari. And I think that when we understand that it's a complete system in itself that helps you evolve, helps you get physically fit, and helps you with mental and emotional, spiritual fitness, then you'll start understanding and liking the art form more. And that would lead to more people being aware and more people learning the martial art. Even if they don't learn the martial art, if they just want to learn the body conditioning part and keep practicing that well into their 70s or 80s, then they can choose to do that too. So I think it's about creating awareness and promoting it from a standpoint of knowledge. So the reason I say that is because I've also seen some videos on YouTube where people tend to, or they portray themselves as Kalari teachers, but they know nothing about the martial art. And these are not Indians. There's like, we cannot progress in Kalari unless we get to the a stage where your guru says, okay, I like what you're doing. You're ready for your next step. So there's no, unlike exams or unlike certain courses, there's no like 70% to pass or 50% to pass. It's either 100 or a 0. You're either ready for your next level or you're not. And where you draw the line is completely up to you. But there's a lot of people who misrepresent themselves as experts. What they do is exactly what has been done to several other arts as well, including yoga. You have these so-called 100-hour, 200-hour yoga instructors who, I don't want to offend anyone's feelings, but the thing is, when you look at yoga as a way of life, then it has to improve your mental and spiritual well-being just as much as it should improve your physical well-being. There's no point looking good if your mind is not in a good place. Right? And that's how you know if someone is a real practitioner of yoga or not. And the same is true for Kalari. So there's a couple that I've seen that don't have their forms right. They don't know what they're doing, but they're trying to teach online for free on YouTube. And, I would advise against all this. So what you want to do is do some research into what is a good school, what your requirements are, what your location is, and then go from there.
Well, with that, we come to the end of today's episode. Thank you so much, Ram, for giving us your time and sharing your valuable insights on this martial arts form. And we really wish you the best for your venture on taking this global and international. And may you succeed, and may more millions of schools sprout for Kalari, just like for karate and kung fu, because after all, it's the grandfather of them all. So yeah, with that,
thank you as well.
So with that, we come to the end of this session, guys. One interesting tidbit for you as well, and Ram, and for the viewers, is that this all the questions of this session were for the first time on this podcast generated by the artificial intelligence application ChatGPT. So that's a very, I'm sure you enjoyed the questions. Those are not credited to me. They come from AI. Having said that,
amazing.
Yeah. So it was quite a very nice experiment to try, but that's that. And with that, guys, we come to the end of today's show. Please don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. We will be playing a very interesting sequence between a duel sequence between Vishnu Asan, who is Ram's guru, with another person. I don't know his name. What is his name? Ram?
That's Vishnu Asan's guru, Hari Asan.
So Guru Shishya Parampara there. So
my guru and his guru.
His guru. So they are in a sequence, and it's a wonderful duel. So you should check that out at the end. Until next time, guys, always remember, Dharma rocks. See you around.